What's going on, guys? I just wanted to do a quick video on something me and a good friend of mine have been discussing. Before I even go into that, I just want to make a few things clear, first of all. Even though I have a different kind of point of view on these characters from my friend, his channel name is TalkAboutShit. I'm going to post it in the comments below. Even though I have kind of a different viewpoint on these characters, they're just that, my viewpoint. And I actually rather like that, because that's why we like these characters. You know, there are so many different ways to interpret them and the messages they leave, and whether we can relate to them or not relate to them. And even though, you know, it's that one character, these two characters, there's a million of us in this world, millions, billions of us in this world, and there's millions and billions of ways to interpret these characters. Everyone could theoretically interpret these characters slightly different, and I love that. So when I'm saying all this, this is just what I take from these characters. And I'm going to post his channel below because he is definitely one of the biggest Batman and Superman fans I know. And he really does love these characters, and he really does understand these characters. And I think he's going to make a video response. I'm not sure, or I'm not positive, but he might. So, you know, if you want to get his take on this, which, you know, is going to be his opinion as well, and his response to what I'm saying, definitely do that. Because it's always good to have different sides of kind of a point of view. So that's that. Next off, again, I don't want it to sound like I don't like these characters. As a matter of fact, these are traits that I'm going to describe that I admire about these characters. You know, these are two of the greats. You know, I think the three greatest characters in comics are Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman. Actually, in reverse order. So I think Superman's the greatest, Batman's the second, and Spider-Man's the third. And obviously, not just because of stories or anything like that, but just because of their contribution to comics as a whole. You can't deny that, you know, Batman and Superman are some of the greatest characters ever made. And they will be remembered forever. So, now, after 2 minutes of me just kind of talking about nothing, let me get into it. Now, me and him had a discussion about whether we find Batman and Superman relatable. I don't. He does. Now, yet again, I don't see it as a fault that I don't see him as relatable. But I don't. And I see them relatable for two different reasons, or unrelatable for two different reasons. And I'm going to start off with Batman, and then I'll move to Superman. Now, Batman's kind of a tricky one, because I think the problem here is that I do find Batman inspirational, but I do not find him relatable. And being inspirational and being relatable are two completely different things, but I'll get into that in just a moment. Now, Batman, the way I've always looked at Batman is he's the guy that's necessary. He's the guy that's there to do the decisions and make the choices that no one else can make. Batman is someone who you're happy he's out there doing what you can't be doing. So one thing that people bring up because I've had this discussion with more than just my friend. I've had this discussion with a lot of people, and a lot of what they bring up is the Dark Knight trilogy, namely the Dark Knight Rises. You know, they say the whole thing at the end was when John Blake. When it was suggested that John Blake took over as Batman, they were saying how that that suggests that anyone could be Batman, or at least Batman. You know, anyone could be a hero. So that goes back to what I was saying about there's a difference between inspiration and relatability. The Dark Knight trilogy, to me, while still being grounded, and I could understand why people would go to that, it still kind of encompasses everything I see in Batman, at least the message. You know, the whole point of the Dark Knight, and I think both Batman and Alfred have said this on two different occasions, it's the whole thing of, you know, when the Joker was doing his whole thing in Dark Knight, you know, even Rachel knew this, the city needs Batman. The city needs a figure that can make the decisions that no one else can. That's why there will come a time when Batman is never not needed, because someone will always need Batman, someone will always need that figure. And the everyman is not that figure. Batman is beyond everyone. You may be able to relate to kind of the hero archetype, but that's not exclusive to just Batman. And yet again, I'm not trying to take away from Batman. Batman is a hero, and you can probably relate to that concept, but that's a common archetype. Superman has heroic traits, Batman has heroic traits, Spider-Man has heroic traits, Green Arrow, Flash, all the Justice League members have heroic traits, all the Avengers have heroic traits, even some anti-heroes have heroic traits. Venom to some degree has heroic traits, Punisher to some degree has heroic traits. So being a hero, while you can relate to that and doing good, that's kind of more of a common thread that runs through all characters. Batman, I view as the guy that just does what everyone else can't do. He's always faced with impossible choices, and he always finds a way to prevail. And that's what we love about Batman. It's awesome watching someone do the impossible, and that's what Batman does. And that's what people love about him. At least one of the things that people love about him. So that's just how I view Batman. I view him as, as I said, the guy who is kind of above society, and he needs to be above society to get things done that society can't do. You may be inspired by him by being faced with a tragedy and rising above, but again, I see that as inspirational. I see it as, there might be some of you guys who have been faced with tragedy, I don't know, and that have risen above, I don't know, but for me personally, I see it as, there will be bad things to happen in your life. There have been bad things happen in your life, but there will always be bad things that are going to happen in your life, and this should inspire you to rise above those bad things. When it comes to Batman as a whole, I don't relate to him. I'm inspired by him. I want to strive to be him, but I'm not him. That's the point. When it comes to Superman now, I see him on I kind of see him the same, but almost through a different filter. Whereas Batman is someone, I'm happy he's out there, and there are aspects of him I would want to be, but at the same time there really wouldn't be, because, I wouldn't want to be faced with impossible deeds that no one else would want to be faced with. Batman is kind of someone you're happy to be with, or Batman's kind of someone you'd be happy to have out there. Superman is someone I would absolutely want to be. Superman, I know different writers write Superman differently. I know some writers write it so he's Clark Kent. Actually, he does make mistakes, and he puts on a public persona as Superman. And I know some people write it as Superman, and Clark Kent's kind of disguise. Well, in either scenario, he still puts on that seamlessly perfect display of perfection. Yet again, there are different takes on Superman. There are takes where the public is kind of skeptical about Superman. It's more of the modern approach for Superman. Some people love him, some people hate him, but kind of the Superman that we're all used to is the Superman that is commonly loved, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And the image of Superman, whether it is just a facade or not, the image of Superman is perfection. The image of Superman is he is always strong enough and charismatic enough and just brave enough to always win the day. And that's the point. And I find that really inspirational. I can't relate to that. Now, yet again, the most common thing I see when it comes to Superman is, he's an outsider, and you can relate to being an outsider. And I get that. That's a very good point. He is an outsider, and you can relate to that. But the problem is, that's something that's almost addressed in kind of a year one Superman, and in a Superman that's kind of finding himself. Once he is Superman, while I'm sure there are times, and there have been times, where he does kind of feel like an outsider, he is he accepts himself, and you know, his foster parents have accepted him as an Earthling. He's not, you know, he is a Kryptonian, but it's kind of like Goku. Goku is a Saiyan. You know, he understands this, you know, after the Saiyan saga happens. He understands this, but he's always going to identify as an Earthling because that's where he was grown and raised. And I think Superman's kind of the same way. And yet again, as I said, while there are people who are going to be skeptical about Superman, Superman is a character that is widely loved. And even though he is kind of an outsider at times, and he can be portrayed as an outsider, he is very much loved by a lot of the public. So, really, and yet again, as I said with Batman before in Rising Above Tragedy, that's being an archetype, I see being an outsider as kind of a common archetype that isn't exclusive to Superman. You know, I'm sure there are times, you know, we all know Batman's a loner. Batman's an outsider. Spider-Man, definitely, especially back in his high school days, he was an outsider. I mean, there's a lot of characters that are outsiders, and that's not common, that is a common archetype. Yet again, that doesn't detract from Superman at all, and I could understand people that can relate to that archetype, but just because Superman happens to have that one archetype doesn't make him as a character that relatable, at least not to me. You know, so really, to recap, Batman's the guy who I admire because he's doing the impossible things that I could never do. He's someone I'm really happy is out there doing the impossible. He has to be above society. Superman is also above society, but he's someone me and everyone else should strive to be. You know, he's perfection. He is the image of perfection. He is what humanity wants to be. You know, he also does the things that no one else can do. But he also does the things that people would want to do. He's just the guy that you should strive to be. So, ultimately, I think this comes down to misunderstanding, inspiring, and relating. As I said, inspiring is encouraging you to want to improve yourself. You know, I'm inspired by my college professors. You know, I want to be a psychologist, for anyone that doesn't know. I'm inspired by my psychology professors because they're where I want to be. They inspire me to want to do better and to get to where they are. I can relate or see myself or see something reminiscent about myself in something, in said subject. I can relate to the fellow students, the students that are trying to get to where we ultimately want to be. So there's a difference, and yet again, this is just what I take away from the characters. If you get something different from these characters, I'd love to hear, and definitely look out for his response video. I'm going to post his channel below, and this is just my take on this. So, you know, if you guys interpret this entirely different, feel free to tell me. That's fine. That's why we love these characters, because there's a million different ways to interpret them, as I said before. So, until the next one, guys, I'll see ya.